These are 10 episodes of Family Guy that have aged horribly. We kick things off with the time Peter got a little too obsessed with Chris's body parts in the episode And the Wiener Is. We see a bit of a competitive streak between Peter and Chris as dad beats son in an ice skating race. Peter brags about his win to the guys at the bar, though they warn him that sooner or later, Chris will be able to beat him in something.
I'm better than him at everything. You name it, sports, video games, even magic tricks.
Looking to continue proving his dominance, Peter challenges Chris to a basketball game at the YMCA. Chris comes very close to beating Peter, so Peter resorts to underhanded tactics to win.
Your mother and I are getting a divorce. You are? Yes! Yes! Oh no, we worked it out.
That's below the belt, man. Speaking of which, Peter and Chris decide to take a nice sauna to unwind, though Peter notices something is wrong with Chris's leg. Only...
Oh my god, that's not your leg!
The image of Chris's thing is etched in Peter's mind, keeping him from even getting it on with his wife.
Thanks to you, our son has a huge wang.
Thanks to me?
Well, he didn't get it from me!
Peter is no longer the big man in the house, and it has him acting quite self-conscious.
I care as much about the size of your penis as you care about the size of my breasts.
Oh my god!
He just can't keep his mind off the memory, lashing out at Chris whenever he feels inadequate. Brian, ever the voice of reason, tries to chime in.
You're overreacting to this Chris stuff. I mean, mine goes inside of me when I stand up. How do you think I feel?
Ugh, thanks for painting that lovely picture, Brian. To compensate, Peter decides to get a comically long car that totally doesn't imply anything, no matter how many times he drives it in and out of the tunnel. Looking for more ways to feel like a man, Peter ends up joining the National Gun Association, where a quick little peek in the shower room reveals he's right at home.
The way we look at it, a man's only as big as the gun he carries.
Okay, but why's he always gotta be looking at people when they're naked, though? Lois immediately sees where Peter's obsession with guns is coming from, calling it pathetic for feeling inadequate next to Chris.
I don't need to compete with my son or his freakishly large penis. I'm a freak.
At the urging of Lois, Peter decides to take Chris on an NGA hunting trip where everything seems to be going well until the two stumble across a bear. Peter tries to kill the bear but freezes up in the moment. Before the bear can hurt him, Chris jumps in and manages to scare the bear off by yelling at it. Peter is impressed with Chris's manhood and apologizes for acting so weird about Chris's other manhood. While there is an important message here, some may find a whole episode focusing on a father's obsession with his son's genitals uncomfortable to sit through. And that's not the only time Family Guy's focused an episode on genitals, just like the time abstinence became the hot new trend in Prick Up Your Ears. When Mayor West is out doing whatever you want to call that, he inadvertently breaks the window of an adult film store, which is noticed by Chris and a few of his friends. Jackpot.
Quick, grab as many as you can before someone sees us.
The boys pop one of the movies in, but before they can get too lost in the action, Lois catches them and kicks them out of the house.
If you're curious about sex, you should talk to your sex ed teacher.
But Chris reveals that the class was cut, so Lois gets the idea to go to the school and teach the class herself. Something about your mom teaching you and your friends all these things is kinda weird. Lois lands the role, but Peter also has to tag along to explain his own brand of education.
Perhaps we could have sexual intercourse. Count me in.
When Lois returns to school the next day, she finds a group of angry parents protesting the class, which the principal informs her has been canceled.
It's because you're teaching those kids about condoms.
Oh, the horror! Instead of the class, the school opts for a church-sponsored presentation about abstinence instead of intercourse.
Sex? Hang on there, Jerry.
God, what are you doing here?
Oh, it's gonna be one of those kinds of presentations. The presenter essentially tells them that abstinence is the way to go, calling condoms dangerous and unsafe.
You wouldn't put a plastic bag over your grandmother's head, would you?
No.
Hard to argue with that bulletproof metaphor. This is enough to convince Meg, who brings home her new ideology to Peter. And even though he's married, he still falls for the propaganda.
If you have sex, your penis will fall off and land in another dimension populated entirely by dogs.
This changes everything, with Peter now pledging to be abstinent himself. Lois discovers this firsthand when she tries to seduce Peter while dressed as Grimace from McDonald's. Don't think about it too much.
Peter, what the hell is this?
My chastity
When
belt.
Lois goes to confront Meg about this, she finds her and a boy in a very compromising position.
You kids were doing it in the ear!
There's freaky, and then there's freaky. Lois tries to talk Meg out of this weird phase, but Meg stands firm that this is how teenage love is supposed to be. Lois goes into great detail about why regular intercourse is the best, but Meg isn't listening. Someone is, though.
Meg?
I love you.
Lois thinks she's got Peter back on her side, but that doesn't seem to be the case when they start to fool around.
What are you doing, Peter? What the hell is wrong with you? you.
Peter is still adamant about being abstinent, but Lois isn't having it, literally forcing herself onto Peter. It's kind of uncomfortable to watch. Lois decides to sneak into school the next day and crash the abstinence presentation, telling the kids that they should practice safe means of intercourse, but still wait until they feel they're ready. This is enough to win the high school over, including Meg and her boyfriend.
Does this mean I'll see you naked?
Yeah.
Oh boy, I can't wait.
I'm sorry Doug dumped you, honey.
Family Guy's heart was in the right place with this one, but with sex education remaining a hot topic issue that many still can't agree on, some would think this episode didn't age the best. But really, it didn't age well at all because of how it plays Lois's assault on Peter for laughs. And that's not the only time serious issues are used for comedy, like when Chris's body issues made Peter get liposuction and he's too sexy for his fat. The weight issues actually first start with Chris, who stopped at the grocery store by a security guard because he thinks Chris is trying to smuggle out 2 hams under his shirt.
Sorry about that, fatty. Hey, Tom, he's just a fat kid.
While the Griffins are staying at a hotel as their house gets cleared of fleas, Peter notices Chris is hesitant to take his shirt off. He first thinks he's hiding bruises and makes a big scene about it, but Lois gets Chris to admit that it's because he's self-conscious about his weight.
No one thinks you're fat.
I'm sorry, sir. You can't park your van on the diving board.
Damn, does everybody have to roast Chris? Since Chris is concerned with his weight, Lois offers to help him diet while Peter gets him on an exercise plan. Meg, ever the responsible older sibling, offers another option.
Why don't you do what the supermodels do? Stick your finger down your throat and throw up till you're skinny.
In the words of a great wise man, shut up, Meg. Peter does his best to get Chris in shape through a variety of exercises, from running on the treadmill to pull-ups in the park to swimming like a salmon upstream. Yet by the end of it, Chris doesn't seem to have lost any weight. He was, however, able to shed a few stewies.
Oh, God.
Not knowing what to do next, Peter is recommended liposuction by Cleveland, which would suck the fat out rather than burning it. But Chris decides not to go through with it, deciding to stay on his diet and exercise plan instead. Lois finds this admirable, questioning who would be lazy and foolish enough to go through a procedure like that. I think we all know who.
Hello.
Good lord, he's built like a nematode from SpongeBob. Everyone is shocked by his transformation, while Lois is worried that losing 200 pounds of weight instantly isn't natural. But Peter says he feels great. With his new lease on life, Peter turns to Brian to help him with something he's always wanted to do, but couldn't when he was fat.
I was wondering if I could put a little saddle on your back and ride you like a horsey.
You really think a no is enough to stop Peter?
Yeah! Come on, old paint. Come on! Yeah!
Come on.
Not completely satisfied with his new look, Peter contemplates getting even more surgery, but Lois tries to tell him that it's the little quirks that make you who you are.
I think I know what you're getting at.
He, in fact, does not know what she's getting at, which becomes apparent when Peter shows up ripped and handsome.
Hey, pal, you can't just walk in here without holy crap, it's Peter.
Lois tries to tell him how disappointed she is in him, but even she can't deny the Greek god that is now her husband. Being beautiful comes with plenty of benefits, as Peter is given special treatment at the grocery store and is even invited to join a beautiful people club. Yeah, I did that once. They actually kicked me out because I was too beautiful. Peter decides to bring Chris to the beautiful people club to give him some inspiration to work towards, but he isn't let in because of his weight. Surely Peter will stand up for him, right?
Well, let me tell you something, buddy. If my son can't come in, then I'll just come in.
He had me in the first half, not gonna lie. Chris now hates his appearance even more, but Peter isn't feeling any guilt over this. Surprisingly, it's Meg that gives Chris a confidence boost, saying she's jealous of how much weight he's lost.
Thanks, Meg. I'm jealous of your mustache.
Meanwhile, Peter is busy driving but gets distracted by his own beautiful reflection, crashing his car and sending him flying into a lard factory. Luckily, he's still alive, but all the lard made him put all his weight back on. Sure, that's probably how that works. Peter is shocked to see his family still loves him after what a jerk he's been.
Well, Peter, I guess you learned a pretty valuable lesson.
Nope.
No surprise there, especially with how this episode handled things like body dysmorphia and healthy weight loss, which are still delicate topics to talk about to this day. And speaking of delicate topics, religion was put on the chopping block when Family Guy turned Jesus into a celebrity that spirals out of control in I Dream of Jesus. While eating at a 50s diner, Peter is reintroduced to a song that is about to ruin everybody's life.
Oh my God, this is Surfin' Bird by the Trashmen. This is my favorite song of all time.
Peter gets himself a record of the song and has it playing non-stop throughout the house, much to the displeasure of, well, everyone, finding any way he can to squeeze it into everyday conversation.
It was my understanding that everyone had heard.
Heard what? Ryan, don't!
Oh, well, a bird.
Desperate for some peace and quiet, Brian and Stewie sneakily steal the record while Peter's sleeping. Peter is obviously furious, and when no one fesses up to the record's disappearance, he decides to just go buy another one. While at the record shop, Peter's quest for the bird that surfs is interrupted when he recognizes a familiar face working behind the counter.
Are you Jesus Christ?
No.
Oh my God, you are! You're Jesus Christ!
Peter's ecstatic to see the savior of mankind has returned to preach the good word. Wait, what word?
Oh, well, a bird. but birds away.
Do you guys think it's possible to get your ears removed? Jesus reveals that he comes to Earth every few hundred years to hide out from his family, so Peter decides to invite him to his house for dinner. Who wouldn't invite a guy who can turn water into wine? After charming the family at dinner, Jesus is ready to call it a night, but Peter tries to convince him to fully reveal himself to the world so he can save the planet, and Peter is gonna help him.
I would like to introduce you to the one, the only, Jesus Christ.
But no one seems to care. It isn't until Jesus literally walks on water that people start to take notice. With his return known to the world, Jesus becomes an overnight celebrity, being featured on various talk shows, magazines, and award shows. Needless to say, fame quickly begins to change him as he's flocked by a posse of women.
Last time I was down here on Earth, I only hung around with one whore.
Afterward, Jesus goes to a party with his group, but when Peter tries to join, he's told there's no more room. Jesus won't even return any of Peter's calls, but he manages to get a hold of him when calling with Lois's phone. It's clear Jesus is making up some BS excuse to not hang out with Peter, and Lois tries to reassure him that he's still his friend deep down.
None of this would have happened if somebody hadn't stolen my fucking surfing bird racket!
I see that wound is still fresh. The next day on the news, Peter sees that Jesus has OD'd and was arrested. So guess who calls to ask to be bailed out? Peter isn't exactly jumping at the opportunity to help his former friend.
Yeah, well, what are you gonna do about it? All right, I'm coming!
Peter finds Jesus disheveled and disappointed in himself, realizing that his human side got the better of him and that he's not ready to be the world's savior just yet. Right before he leaves, Jesus gives Peter a parting gift.
What is it, Dad?
What, you haven't heard? Fuck! Oh, well, a bird. But birds away.
Portraying the face of Christianity as an imperfect party animal is still a controversial decision, one that still isn't widely accepted by religious folks even all these years later. But that isn't the only questionable episode on religion, as Family Guy sees the show once again rely on stereotypes when Lois discovers she's actually Jewish. While trying to get freaky one night, Peter makes a discovery on Lois's body, claiming she has a third boob.
Peter, that's not a boob. That's a lump.
A lump? Holy crap!
The pair go to the hospital to find out it luckily isn't breast cancer, yet Dr. Hartman still wants to run some tests. This involves looking at her family history, and upon looking at Lois's mom's birth certificate, everybody learns that she's actually a Holocaust survivor and, by that metric, Jewish. When she confronts her mother about this, Lois learns that Carter had his wife conceal her heritage so that he could get into country clubs.
It was the right thing to do.
It was the right thing to do, dear.
That means Lois, as well as her children, are all technically Jewish. Not Peter, of course, but can you guess who's gonna make the biggest deal out of all this? Lois sits down with Max Weinstein to figure out how to handle this new realization, though Max says being Jewish isn't about acting one way or another. Maybe someone should have told Peter that.
Shalom, Jews!
Peter's ready to embrace the family's change in background, but Max tells him that becoming Jewish doesn't just happen overnight.
It's a process that involves spiritual education and good works.
So what you're saying is that it happens overnight?
Fully committing to the new way of life, Peter decides to take the family to temple to become the best Jewish person he can be.
That's my Jewish laugh. I'm working on a Jewish laugh.
Peter even decides to enroll the kids into Jewish schools, which Stewie isn't too excited about until he learns about the wonderful 8 days of presents that is Hanukkah.
Yeah, this Judaism thing is going to be better than I thought.
Because of his change in religion, Peter is visited by the ghost of his uber-Catholic father, coming with a warning for those who betray their faith.
If you forsake your religion, you'll spend eternity in hell.
Side note, this has been quite the cameo fest for Season 3 characters. Peter decides to denounce the faith he's had for a few days to return to his devout Catholic lifestyle. He becomes so anti-Semitic that he even puts Lois up on a cross.
How do you like it? Huh? How do you like it?
Why is his first instinct always to commit a hate crime? Lois escapes to her mother's house to wait for Peter's craziness to blow over, yet her mother sees this as something more serious. This is just like what Carter did to her, forcing her to repress her identity, and has regretted it ever since. Fed up with Peter's anti-Semitism, Lois decides that the family will be holding a Passover dinner this year rather than an Easter dinner, which obviously upsets Peter.
Lois, this family believes in the Easter Bunny. He died for our sins in that helicopter crash.
Yep, that's the story he's going with. Lois goes through with her Passover plan, but a plastered Peter dressed as the Easter Bunny crashes the party. Now what he plans to do, he's not really sure.
All right, I'm gonna go lie down, and then I'm gonna come back and mess up your shader.
Peter returns to wreak havoc again, stating that he can't be with someone who doesn't believe in Jesus.
Hey, heard my name.
Wow, Jesus! Oh, you're dead now, Lois.
In actuality, Jesus explains that he's Jewish and that Judaism and Christianity aren't all that different. What really matters is that you treat others the way you want to be treated, and while that is a nice sentiment, the heavy use of Jewish stereotypes in this episode still feel rather dated and lazy, feeling like something that nowadays just doesn't work. And speaking of stereotypes, more presented themselves when Chris escapes to an isolated tribe in South America in Jungle Love. Fearing being paddled on his first day of high school, Chris tries to back out of going, but Lois reassures him that's a made-up myth Seth to scare freshmen. Feeling relieved, Chris hops out of the car, ready for a great day of Lois, you absolute devil woman! Thrown to the wolves, Chris flees to the cafeteria but ends up being paddled by students, teachers, lunch ladies, and the mayor of all people. Now, how do I get in on this? Chris is obviously traumatized and doesn't want to go back, but Lois assures him things will get better. Brian tells Chris that he can't run from his problems as he tried doing that before by joining the Peace Corps. But judging by how quickly Chris is packing that suitcase, that may be just what he's been looking for.
Anyway, my point is that
the next morning, Lois finds a note left by Chris informing them of joining the Peace Corps and flying out to South America. Now, where could he have gotten an idea like that?
Look, it's me, all right? He got the idea from me.
Brian, what the hell is wrong with you?
Before he can be stopped, Chris parachutes into a remote African tribe where he immediately becomes enamored with the chief's daughter, Loka. Chris ends up calling home to let the family know he's fine, planning to come home after a month when people forget he's a freshman.
Hey guys, is everyone on the phone?
Oh, I gotta go.
Something's in the oven.
I lost a shoe.
Phew, that was almost too much Meg for one video. As the festivities rage on in the village, Loka asks Chris to dance. He agrees, which is apparently the equivalent of saying I do in this country.
You have engaged the entire tribe in dance. According to our customs, you are now married to my daughter.
Ah, young, one-day-old love. While it's good for Chris, it's bad news for the family as they receive a letter from him explaining that now he won't be coming back home at all. Not ready to lose their son, the Griffins book the first plane to South America in hopes of bringing Chris home. The family is reunited and the folks are introduced to Chris's new wife, though Lois isn't super convinced it's serious.
Well, maybe here, but not in America, where God pays attention.
Lois tries to convince Chris to leave, but he's not going anywhere. Peter may not be either, as whipping out $30 has him being treated like a king.
We've never seen that much money before. You are the richest man in the country.
This lands him a prime hut spot and around-the-clock servants. Lois urges them to leave, but Peter likes being somewhere he can be somebody. At least he isn't getting drunk out of his mind here. Chris confronts Peter for taking advantage of the village people, claiming he's just using this place to escape from his problems at home. Lois makes him realize he's doing the same thing, running off to a foreign land to escape the reality of being a freshman.
Freshman?
Freshman.
Whoops, I think I said the secret word. The villagers chase the Griffins through the jungle, but luckily they're able to hop on a plane just in time. The portrayal of native tribes in this manner was birthed through racist caricatures from decades ago, and many would agree that's where these kinds of characterizations should have been left. And what also may not work nowadays is tackling the topic of reparations through a story involving Peter having a black ancestor in Peter Griffin, husband, father, brother? The family goes to the high school basketball game to see Chris wipe the floor in his new role on the team, literally.
Oh yeah, that's my son out there. I taught him how to wipe.
On the drive home, Peter starts to think his son is possessed when he starts speaking street talk.
Yo, did y'all check me when that hottie was all up in my Kool-Aid?
Peter just doesn't understand the kids these days with their hippity-hop music, you dig? I'm trying, guys, I really am. Peter confides in Cleveland that he doesn't know what to do about Chris's new urban personality, so Cleveland suggests Peter teach him about their own heritage so he can relate to his roots. Peter takes Chris to the library so he can learn about how sweet being Irish is and finds a book detailing the Griffin's ancestors from aristocrats to philosophers.
Thomas, would you please go look for a job?
Why?
But upon going all the way back to 1840, they come across an ancestor named Nate Griffin who, let's just say, has a very different complexion.
Holy crap, I'm black!
Peter can't believe he's technically part black, but reading Nate Griffin's diary proves that those Griffin habits are certainly generational.
So I took her head and stuck it by my butt and blew a huge fart right back at her.
In order to get in touch with his newfound heritage, Peter joins Cleveland at an African American League meeting where Peter actually manages to convince them he belongs there since he's watched a lot of black television.
So before you decide that I don't belong here, remember this. I was there!
Peter returns home to find Lois's parents have also decided to share their family heritage with their grandchildren. But when they take a closer look, they realize that not only were the Pewterschmidt family slave owners, they actually owned Nate Griffin. As if family get-togethers weren't awkward enough. Peter's obviously mad about this revelation, and while Carter just wants to move past this discovery, accidentally whipping Peter certainly doesn't help his case.
You can whip me all you like, white devil, but you'll never break my spirit!
Compelled to fully accept his black side, Peter decides to wear a dashiki and even changes his name to what he calls his slave name.
From now on, call me Kichwa Tembo.
Fun fact, that translates to head elephant in Swahili. Carter pulls head elephant to the side and asks what he can do to make this right. Peter states that he wants reparations, which essentially boil down to an apology and some Rice Krispie treats. But Carter would rather die than give Peter an apology, so he does the easier thing and just gives him $20,000.
How do you spell Kichwa? Yeah, you know what? Screw the Kichwa. Make it out to Peter, P-E-T-E.
Instead of using the money to actually help anyone, Peter decides to transform his living room into Pee-wee's playhouse.
There's a chair that freaking talks. Hey, look, there's a fish that give advice. Holy crap!
Lois suggests Peter give the money to a black charity, but he'd rather keep being a man-child. What else is new? Word gets back to his peers in the African American League, who disavow him for not using the money to give back to the community like the rest of them. At the next basketball game, Peter is shunned by everyone, black, white, and even the lepers.
Hey, can we sit there?
No, these are saved.
While in the bathroom, Peter receives a vision from Nate Griffin himself, who tells Peter he should stop trying to conform to one identity or another and just try to be a good man. Peter realizes the error of his ways and looks to make things right by sharing his money with his brothers and sisters.
It doesn't matter if you're black or white. The only color that really matters is green.
With reparations still being a hot-button issue to this day, you might think having the issue portrayed through a man who never really suffered from the effects of racial oppression might not be well received in the current day. But that's not the only time Family Guy misused racial issues in a plotline, as the show introduced a new prominent black character to replace Cleveland in Jerome Is the New Black. With Cleveland off having his own show, the guys are feeling a bit lopsided, so Peter suggests they find a new fourth guy for their group. Despite interviewing a few candidates, Peter has yet to find someone who can be the fourth man. Brian offers to fill that hole, giggity, but Peter is against it considering the whole Quagmire thing.
What Quagmire thing? Oh, just that he hates you.
Quagmire hates me?
Hates you.
And thus, Family Guy's greatest rivalry since Peter and the Chicken was born. Horace asks the guys if they want to enter the bar's darts tournament, but they're one man short of a team.
Did I hear some sorry-ass fools in need of a mother-loving fourth?
Enter Jerome, the clam's newest patron and the guy's new fourth man. After a night of fun, Peter brings Jerome back to the house to meet the family, but it turns out some of them are already acquainted.
Jerome?
Loose Lois.
What? You guys know each other?
Not only do they know each other, but Lois and Jerome used to date. Surely Peter will be totally normal about this whole thing. Lois and Jerome express interest in catching up, but Peter isn't too sure about that.
What, you dating that guy? It's just a lot to take in.
Oh, yeah. You're telling me.
Not helping Lois. Lois assures Peter that she's married to him for a reason, but it sounds like Peter won't be comfortable until Jerome is out of their lives for good. When coming home from the bar one night, a drunken Peter spies Jerome watching TV in his house. Still bitter, Peter haphazardly throws a beer bottle through the window, which accidentally starts a house fire.
Dear God and Black Jesus.
The next day, Peter finds Jerome in his kitchen. Oblivious to Peter being the culprit, Lois offers Jerome to stay at their place while his house is being repaired, which only amplifies Peter's fears. Peter tries to be cool about this, but it's kind of hard to be when stuff like this happens.
Out of the way, I'm an EMT.
Taking matters into his own hands, Peter tries to scare Jerome off by dressing up as a ghost. Clearly, someone should have paid more attention in history class.
Surely, Jerome, you don't want to stay in the same house as a ghost who carries a torch around.
Peter makes it clear he wants Jerome gone because he thinks he's trying to steal Lois. This upsets Jerome, who claims he'd never do something like that to a friend, so much so that he decides to leave. Though Peter is pretty happy with himself, Lois is disgusted by Peter's actions and assumptions. She even shows him a gift Jerome got him as a thank you for letting him stay in their house. Realizing the error of his ways, Peter goes to apologize to Jerome and the two make up, only their friendship doesn't really get all that fleshed out going forward. It's clear Jerome was just meant to replace one black character with another, and the relegating of black characters to these token roles is a trend that should have been left in the past. And what should also probably be left in the past is jokes about mental disabilities, like an extra large medium, where Chris falls in love with a girl with Down syndrome. While out on a family hiking trip, Chris and Stewie end up getting lost in the woods. Night falls and it looks like they'll be sleeping in the wilderness.
Stewie, are we gonna die?
Hey. Probably.
Thanks for the confidence boost, Stewie. If they manage to survive, Chris plans to finally work up the courage to ask out a girl named Ellen in his class. But after 3 days pass, it looks like Stewie and Chris may not make it, but thankfully they're come across by Bruce. He's always there when you need him most. Stewie's eager to see Chris make good on his promise, and while Chris doesn't think he can go through with it, Stewie convinces him to give it a shot. With Stewie in tow at school, Chris introduces him to the girl he wants to ask out, though his choice surprises Stewie just a tad.
Wait a minute, that's the girl?
Yeah, isn't she special?
That's the way the state of Rhode Island would put it.
Not deterred by her Down syndrome, Chris seems head over heels for Ellen, even getting Stewie on board as well.
Your hair makes me laugh.
I'm guessing this one owned a bunny, but not anymore.
Chris finally gets to the point, expressing how much he likes her and his intentions to take her on a date.
Okay, pick me up Saturday at 8.
Great. See you then.
With Chris so nervous about his date, Stewie decides to help him look the best he ever has through a lively song that may or may not make some questionable remarks about his date.
You must impress that ultra-booming, all-consuming, poorly grooming, Down syndrome girl.
Leave it to Family Guy to have a song about mental disorders ready to go. Chris and Ellen finally get to their date, though it has a bit of a rocky start.
Hey, what the hell you think you're doing?
Sitting down?
Get up and pull my chair out for me.
Things only get rockier as Ellen continues to press Chris for not asking her about herself and demands a shoulder rub, which Chris is quick to oblige her with. After an interesting date, Chris drops Ellen off at home, but she's not done with him yet.
I need somebody to make me an ice cream sundae. So get in the house.
Chris does as he's told, but Ellen berates him for putting chocolate sauce on it. Now, I'm not a scientist, but I think the sauce is what makes it a sundae, no? Fed up, Chris stands up for himself and exclaims how he thought people with Down syndrome were different, but they're just a bunch of jerks like the rest of the world. His words, not mine.
I got bad news for you, buddy. You just blew it. Get out of my house now!
Chris is bummed about the date, but Stewie says he still followed through on his promise, and that takes guts even if Chris didn't get to the good part of the date.
She would have crushed your into a diamond with her robot strength hand. Come on, let's get out of here.
Comments like that, as well as a whole song about Down syndrome, make this episode a tricky one to talk about to this day. Despite its questionable content, I do have to give props to the team for actually hiring an actress with Down syndrome to play Ellen. It's the little victories. But relying on tired stereotypes doesn't always have little victories, as seen when Peter got injected with the gay gene in the episode Family Gay. Anytime Peter walks through the door, you just expect something weird to come out of his mouth.
You know how you always wanted a real diamond engagement ring?
Oh my God!
That's right, I bought a horse.
Peter is adamant the horse will make a fine addition to the family, despite the fact that it's brain dead and pees itself.
You know what? I don't want him to feel self-conscious. Everybody pee.
Deciding to enter his prize steed into a horse race, Peter's plan goes off the rails when his horse suddenly goes off the track.
It looks like Till Death has taken a right turn and is heading into the stands.
That's what Peter gets for horsing around. Don't click away, please. While the horse may be gone, Peter and Lois are still left with $100,000 in damages caused by the animal. Peter decides to look in the newspaper for a second job and happens to find an ad looking for participants in an experiment.
Asparagus.
Experiments.
Experiments.
Right.
All Peter has to do is get injected with a few isolated genes and he'll get paid a ton of money. Sounds good to me, jab me up. The final one is the gene they believe makes people gay, but Peter has some hang-ups about that.
Are you crazy? I don't want to take a chance on being gay.
We'll give you $125.
All right, I'll do it.
Peter returns home acting quite differently, which is cause for concern from Lois.
Peter, are you gay?
Guilty!
Let's keep moving. This goes on for a really long time. Lois is worried about this change in Peter, urging him to go back to the doctor and have the effects reversed. However, she changes her tune when she sees the positives, like Peter suddenly becoming good at cooking, cleaning, and dressing. But it's not all rainbows, or should I say it's too many rainbows? As when Lois tries to make romantic advances on Peter, he shuts her down.
Wait a minute, you mean we can't have sex?
No.
Wanting her big, dumb, straight man back, Lois goes to the doctor, who tells her they just have to wait for the effects to wear off, which could take days, years, or possibly never go away. While Lois is willing to try living with this, Peter has other ideas, evident by bringing home a boy toy named Scott.
I'm here, I'm queer, but don't get used to it because I'm leaving you.
At least with Peter gone, the house isn't being destroyed weekly, but it seems like Lois actually misses the chaos he brings. Hating to see her like this, Brian and Stewie decide to enroll Peter in a camp claiming they can make people straight. How do they achieve this? Well, there are several nuanced treatments, like beating a gay guy with a bat. Seems excessive. Scott stops by the Griffins after Peter hasn't been seen for 2 days. Lois is obviously worried, but Brian tries to calm them down by admitting to putting Peter in the camp. Surprisingly, this doesn't sit well with Lois, who goes to take Peter from the camp.
This is who you are. I can't change you, and it would be wrong for me to try.
Now a free man, Peter returns to an overjoyed Scott, who surprises him with one of Peter's wildest fantasies. While that's going on, an interesting discovery is made over at the hospital.
Oh, here are my notes about the gay gene. Huh. It wears off after 2.5 weeks.
Cue the realization in 3, 2, 1.
Holy crap!
The episode's stereotypes involving gay people were controversial when it was released, and especially so nowadays, even to a point where Family Guy themselves have made it a point to roll back these kinds of jokes for future episodes.
In fairness, we've been trying to phase out the gay stuff.
And to make sure you don't phase us out of your watch list, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date on our latest videos. Here's one you can watch now on Family Guy's worst episodes.